One of the common situations we encounter these days is harassment, and harassment in workplace, and many times it can be called as bullying. Bullying is a word which people do not like to use very much, because we know bullies were usually people in a powerful situation who would bully other ones who have no control or power over anyone. But workplace harassment is a common thing, and it causes a lot of stress to the person who is being harassed, and such continued harassment can cause stress in the person, can cause many psychophysiological and psychosomatic disorders in the person, and can demotivate the person from work and lead to what we call as stress and burnout. And the person can sometimes get a number of psychological reactions to that. They might get anxiety, they might get depressed, and many times they might even feel suicidal. So harassment is something which needs to be identified and dealt with. So I will talk about harassment from two points of view. If you see somebody being harassed, or if you think that you are being harassed. So if you think that you are being harassed, well, it's a subjective feeling, it might be right, it might be partly right, it might be totally right, it might be wrong. Some person might actually be trying to say something in order to help you, but you feel harassed because of your nature, your personality, and you think that you are being pushed to a large extent. So if you watch somebody is being harassed by another person in your office, that is a little more tricky situation, and that can be dealt with by two ways. One is interpersonal way, by talking to the person who is being harassed, or talking to the person who is harassing, if you have a good relationship with them, or otherwise you have to take help of the system. All workplaces should have a system to deal with harassment. Now, how can harassment manifest? So harassment can manifest if you talk loudly to a person, if you shout at a person, if you throw things at a person, if you are very critical of a person in public or in the presence of others. So anything which can emotionally upset or distress a person can be considered harassment. So there is no single definition of harassment, because harassment is subjective and harassment is objective. So if you find that somebody is shouting, or somebody is discriminating against someone, giving somebody extra work, or giving somebody no work at all, and ignoring them. So there can be many different phases of harassments which can be there. So harassments are acute, they are sudden, like you shout at someone or scream at someone or ask somebody to get out of the place, or you curse someone. Behaviors which are not at all acceptable. They are not good for self, they are not good for organization. So they are not good for anyone. Or it might be slow and chronic one, like either you give somebody very difficult jobs, or you give somebody very silly jobs, or give them a job which they have not been hired for, or give them a job which is totally meaningless. So it is a continuous stress which a person is having, feeling that they have no meaning in the workplace, they are not serving any purpose in the workplace, and which leads to stress and burnout. So how do we deal with harassment? Again, the first step would be acknowledge. So one should acknowledge, well, I think that your behavior amounts to harassment of so and so person. And before you go any further, after acknowledging, you try to find out what is the reason behind that. Many times the person who is harassing has his or her own problem. They might be stressed out, they might be having a personality problem, they might be having something, they have themselves been harassed. So it's like a displacement, somebody harasses somebody else, and then somebody harasses somebody else junior to them, and that junior harasses somebody else. So it just passes on. So you see, the whole atmosphere is getting vitiated. So you acknowledge, then you try to find out the reason for the person's harassment behaviors and see how you can help with that. And then it has to be worked around. There are no magic solutions, there are no immediate solutions. If personal or interpersonal or therapeutic methods do not work, then one has to take resort from the system. Many times in a professional organization, you might have to approach the system directly. So system is that there should be an officer in every organization who would look after, I'm not talking about only discipline, but about interpersonal behaviors in a company. And that it should be brought to the notice of that person or that officer that I think this is what is happening. And that person can make an inquiry. It can be a personal inquiry, it can be inquiry with a committee, and then take it further to the management. And it's for the management to take action. Now, when we talk about action, action always does not mean a disciplinary action. Many times it can be a corrective action, because if we find that the person who is harassing has his own issues and problems, then maybe we should give some time for that, resolve that, and then otherwise it's not a very good idea to lose a good person who might be very efficient and productive in a company but is going through a bad patch. So looking at the mental health not only of the person who is harassed but also of the person who is harassing, it's very important. So we acknowledge, we look at what it is, do some interventions, either corrective or disciplinary, and then follow up on that to see how it is working. Many times one should not try to, in an organization, not try to take it in a one-to-one situation, but have a collective responsibility, a collective decision making about harassments. So these harassments are behavioral harassments I'm talking about. Talking about sexual harassment is an entirely different topic, and when we talk about sexual harassment, we also need to remember what the law is and what is the legal situation about that. That requires a much more detailed and different discussion.